Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. Catholic bishops are taking a stand against politicians of that faith who support abortions. We'll tell you how their new document could affect President Biden's communion. Court documents show unnamed people involved in the January 6th Capitol breach. Republican congressmen want answers from the federal government. The gun-wielding couple in St. Louis, Missouri pleaded guilty to misdemeanor charges, but not because they think that they did the wrong thing last year. The husband explains his reasoning behind their actions. An entire team in Portland's police bureau resigns from their positions. This after an officer is indicted on a protest assault charge. Concerns are raised about what this means for the city as unrest continues. And North Korea says it's prepared for dialogue and confrontation with the U.S. We speak to an expert who gives us his take on how best to deal with the regime. Bishops in the United States have voted to approve a new document. It may reprimand Catholic politicians who support abortions, and that includes President Biden. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more from the bishops who voted for and against the measure.
Proposed national norms.
Catholic bishops in the U.S. have decided overwhelmingly to advance a measure that could prevent pro-abortion politicians from receiving communion, which is the act of receiving the Eucharist or the body of Christ in the form of bread or wine during Mass. Officials announced the result of the vote on Friday. 168 bishops were in favor, with 55 against. And House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and President Biden, who support abortion, are in the spotlight. Biden's proposed budget would remove the Hyde Amendment, which stops federal funds from going towards most abortions. The Archbishop of Kansas City, Joseph Naumann, says a cause for concern is how Biden refers to an abortion as a right as opposed to a choice.
And it's out of this context that this president now says it's a right, and therefore everybody is going to have to pay taxes for this, as we see the attack on the Hyde Amendment. Everybody is to be implicated in it.
Naumann's statement suggests under Biden's plan, all taxpayers would be involved in these abortions, which the teachings of the Catholic Church say are gravely contrary to moral law. But Robert McElroy, the Bishop of San Diego, raises concerns about excluding people from the Eucharist.
First of all, the Eucharist itself, which is the source and summit of the life of the Church, will inevitably become a tool in the vicious partisan turmoil that roils our nation. It will be impossible to prevent the weaponization of the Eucharist in partisan battles, even if every one of us in this conference wants to do so.
The vote paves the way to create a teaching document on communion. It's expected to include a section that would strongly reprimand Catholic politicians who disobey the Church's teaching on abortion and support it. The chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops says the document would offer guidelines, not mandatory policies. Therefore, individual bishops can make the decision about who can receive communion. The Conference of Bishops is expected to deliberate on the document at an in-person meeting, possibly in November. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Reporters asked Biden how he personally feels about the measure. He said it's a private matter and that he doesn't think the church will deny him communion. Americans across the nation are getting ready to celebrate Juneteenth this weekend for the first time as a national holiday. 14 Republican representatives voted no to the new holiday. But why? One of them told NTD he supports celebrating the emancipation of slaves, but he opposes naming it Independence Day because he says this name divides Americans based on race. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the story.
Juneteenth marks the day that slaves in Texas learned of their freedom in the United States. 14 Republican representatives voted against this Juneteenth as a national holiday. They say they do support celebrating the emancipation of slaves, but they don't support the name of this new holiday. That is Juneteenth, National Independence Day.
Everybody would have passed this thing out unanimously if they would have taken it through committee, and they would have changed the name to Juneteenth National Emancipation Day, because that's what it celebrates, is the emancipation of the slaves.
Representative Tiffany tells NTD he would have voted yes if they changed the name.
And creating a second National Independence Day just divides America. I believe in the one of the great sayings, philosophical sayings of America, which is e pluribus unum, out of many, one. And we have many shared values in America. This serves to divide our shared values.
However, naming this day National Independence Day will create confusion and push Americans to pick one of those 2 days as their Independence Day based on their racial identity.
Representative Ralph Norman says he voted no for the same reason, suggesting it would be more appropriate to call it Freedom Day or Emancipation Day. While others say they're more skeptical of the broader goal of creating a new National Independence Day, Representative Rosendale tells us in a statement, it's very clearly tied to the larger hard-left agenda to enshrine the racial history of this country as a prime aspect of our national story. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
House Republicans want answers from the federal government, like what did the FBI know, if anything, before and during the Capitol attack on January 6th? NTD's Miguel Moreno has that story.
Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert says he wants answers from the federal government about January 6th.
We need to know how many federal agents, how many informants had given information to federal agencies, and why in the world all of that information was not provided to people that needed to protect Capitol Hill.
He's not the only one asking questions. In a letter to the FBI, Congressman Matt Gaetz refers to unnamed people mentioned but not charged in court documents. How many worked as a confidential informant or as an undercover operative for the federal government? Historically, the FBI has used informants and undercover agents to infiltrate and investigate their targets. Last year in Michigan, for example, the agency cracked down on a plot to kidnap Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Legal documents show that at least 4 unnamed people affiliated with the FBI were in on the conspiracy, 2 informants and 2 undercover agents. These informants or agents participated in the group's meetings, exercises, and surveillance of the governor's property. For months, the FBI knew of the criminal plot before they made arrests.
And as a former felony judge, I would have no problem sending people to prison that broke into this Capitol, that literally broke in, or that did damage, or that stole things here. But were some of those people doing those things working for the FBI? Were they egged on by federal authorities?
The Department of Justice hasn't gotten back to us. Gaetz says he expects answers from the FBI by the 1st of August. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Portland Police Bureau's entire rapid response team has resigned from their positions. This in response to an officer being indicted on a protest assault charge. Some worry what this could mean for the riot-plagued city. Here are the details.
As of Wednesday, Portland no longer has a rapid response team. The whole unit of officers voted to leave their voluntary positions after Officer Corey Budworth was indicted. The team of around 50 officers were responsible for responding to riots, civil unrest, and demonstrations. And because Portland's been dealing with unrest and numerous violent riots since the spring of 2020, this team was very active. Members of the far-left anarcho-communist Antifa network have been responsible for most of the riots and demonstrations. The police bureau said despite no longer serving as volunteers for the rapid response team, the officers will continue their regular assignments. This comes one day after Officer Budworth was indicted with 1 count of 4th-degree assault for alleged excessive and unlawful use of force during a protest-turned-riot last August. However, the Portland Police Union called the indictment politically driven and said in a statement, Budworth has been caught in the crossfire of agenda-driven city leaders and a politicized criminal justice system. Concerns are now being raised about what the absence of a riot squad will mean for the city. One police officer told the Post-Millennial, "Now that the riot team is no more, we have no clue what's going to happen. We don't have enough patrol officers to be pulled from the road to handle huge crowds. We're only backups with no gear like the riot team has." Journalist Andy No, who wrote a book on Antifa, said in a tweet, "The significance of the entire resignation from the rapid response team means there will essentially be no response from Portland police when a riot breaks out." Just last week, the Portland Police Association relocated its headquarters to an undisclosed location due to repeated attacks by rioters.
You may remember the couple in St. Louis, Missouri, who held out their guns when Black Lives Matter protesters approached their home last June. They pleaded guilty to misdemeanor charges, but they're not backing down from their position on gun rights. The husband explains his guilty plea. NTD's Allison Lee reports.
Missouri lawyer Mark McCloskey told Newsmax in an interview on Thursday why he pleaded guilty to the misdemeanor charge over the gun incident last June. He says the prosecutor dropped all the felony charges and gun charges and only charged him with a crime that said he purposefully placed other people in apprehension of imminent fear of physical injury.
And by God, I did it. That's what the guns were for. The guns were there to scare people off and make sure they didn't approach us. And that's what the guns did. And as I said in the courthouse steps, if that's a crime in Missouri, I did it and I'll do it again.
Mark McCloskey adds that is what the Second Amendment is there for. He pleaded guilty on Thursday to a Class C misdemeanor of 4th-degree assault and will pay a $750 fine. His wife, Patricia McCloskey, pleaded guilty to a Class A misdemeanor of 2nd-degree harassment and will pay a $2,000 fine. Mark McCloskey likens the fines to a parking ticket. They will not have to spend any time in jail, but have to surrender the guns they used in the incident. The husband explains what the situation was like on that day. He says, "We grabbed our weapons and we stood out on the front porch, which is what the Second Amendment is there for, to keep and bear arms. We were bearing our arms." He's running as a Republican for U.S. Senate in Missouri next year. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Texas temperatures can be intense, but that doesn't seem to stop human traffickers. Homeland Security has intercepted 2 U-Haul trucks packed with illegal immigrants drenched in sweat. This picture was taken in Texas. 33 immigrants were found locked inside a U-Haul truck at a McDonald's parking lot. CBP says they were close to dying in the near 100-degree heat. 12 patients were taken to hospitals, but there were no casualties. Here's another similar case. This picture was taken in Laredo over the weekend. Another U-Haul truck, this time 27 people. Again, the immigrants just drenched in sweat. CBP says the temperature in this cargo compartment was a sweltering 106 degrees. The driver and passenger, both U.S. citizens, were arrested. U.S. citizens in Texas are using social media platforms to transport thousands of illegal immigrants around Border Patrol checkpoints and into major U.S. cities. They're being recruited by cartels and lured by the promise of quick cash. Here are the details.
There's a new type of business that's booming. It's smuggling illegal immigrants around Border Patrol. Cartels are recruiting Texas drivers via social media to haul illegal immigrants from the border to cities like San Antonio, Houston, Austin, or Dallas. One driver told the Epoch Times he was promised $1,000 per person for the 7 Guatemalans they drove from Kinney County to San Antonio. The senior Homeland Security Investigations HSI official in the Del Rio region explains how it works. The official said drivers will get a general idea of the pickup location, and as the illegal immigrant approaches, communication will start coming in. Apparently, these drivers use encrypted messaging apps and Google Maps pin drops to dodge Border Patrol checkpoints. And usually, the foot guide that helped the immigrant cross the border illegally communicates directly with the driver. But the official said sometimes there's a third party coordinating the smuggling from Mexico or even from within the U.S. Since October, the San Antonio HSI office has started over 320 criminal investigations related to human smuggling. This type of human smuggling resulted in the horrific death of all 8 illegal immigrants in a driver's pickup truck. In March, an Austin man was charged with transporting illegal immigrants and resulting in their death. The driver didn't stop when a Texas state trooper tried to pull him over for speeding. Documents say he was speeding and at times going over 100 miles per hour. He then collided with another vehicle head-on, which took the 8 immigrants' lives and put the driver and the passenger he collided with in the hospital. A DPS director said cartels are trying to recruit drivers because they need more manpower, and they're using social media and promising a lot of money.
North Korea's Kim Jong-un announced he's ready for both dialogue and confrontation with the U.S. This comes 1 month after the Biden administration held a summit with South Korea's president, where they discussed the North Korean regime. NTD's Christina Kim has the story.
North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un is giving his first comments about the Biden administration. According to state media, the regime leader stressed the need for dialogue and especially confrontation. This comes as the U.S. reiterated its goal of complete denuclearization for North Korea, but noted the administration won't focus on achieving a grand bargain. Asia expert Joseph Bosco says the regime's statement is relatively routine in terms of the country being prepared for any outcome. And the fact that he even mentioned dialogue is a good thing, since Kim hasn't always included that in the past. But Bosco notes the pandemic has taken quite a toll on the country. Couple that with their agricultural issues and U.S. sanctions, the timing of the message may show that Kim is under pressure.
And he was hoping that they were giving Biden time to see if he would make some kind of concessions. He has not done that. And I think they're feeling the heat and decide they'd better make a deal while they can.
Bosco says the only tactic that has worked when dealing with North Korea in the last 20 years is the maximum pressure approach from the Trump administration, and that has 3 elements.
One was the economic sanctions, which are the toughest that have ever been imposed on North Korea. Secondly was the credible threat of force. Trump made some fire and fury statements that indicated he was actually willing to use force if they continued with their long-term missile tests or nuclear tests. And the third was the human rights issue. Trump gave 3 major speeches to the United Nations, the Korean National Assembly, and his State of the Union, where he focused heavily on North Korea's atrocious human rights record.
And he says a key component to dealing with the North Korean regime is to also be hard on its partner, China. Bosco says the Chinese regime has used North Korea's nuclear forces to their advantage.
They've been able to play that North Korea card against the United States and persuade us not to get tough on human rights, on Taiwan, on the South China Sea, on trade, because we need China, presumably, to help us with North Korea. But they've never really helped.
Bosco says the Biden administration can't try to strike a middle ground. They must be tough. He hopes Biden follows Trump's approach and says he believes it will give them a much better chance of succeeding. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Coming up, the number of shootings in New York City is rising sharply. Officials said lack of police funding is a major reason. And a new experiment to help end youth homelessness will be coming to New York City soon. The plan is to pay homeless youth over $1,200 per month. Find out more on NTD News. After a massive budget cut to the police department, the number of shootings in New York City has been going up in recent months, with some of them more brutal than others. NTD's Arian Pazdar has more, and just a warning, the following footage is graphic.
This attempted murder happened on Thursday. The suspect you see here ran up to the 24-year-old and started shooting at him. He showed no signs of hesitation whatsoever when children got between him and the victim. He then took off. Recently, you can hear about shootings in the city pretty much every day. And in some cases, it's not even adults who are the victims. Just last week, a 10-year-old boy died after being shot.
Our streets are shooting galleries. Children are getting killed.
Shootings in the city have gone up by over 70% at beginning of this year compared to the beginning of last year. And officials are attributing the spike to multiple factors. One is cutting funding for the police.
It doesn't work. And getting more money into these departments and federal standards, cops, grants, all those things, I'm fully supportive of. And community policing, get back to community policing.
They say to fix the police issue in this country, law enforcement should be funded more, not less, to provide them with proper training.
When there's a problem, like I said, in a hospital, you increase staff, you increase training, you increase standards.
The second issue is bail reform, which took effect in New York City last year. Cash bail was removed for many crimes. The argument was that it wasn't fair that those with money had the privilege and resources to not go to jail.
That this bail reform law is not working. There's a direct correlation to this law being enacted and the uptick in crime and shooting and homicides.
Because of bail reform, 9 out of 10 people who are arrested with an illegal firearm are released the next day. And 5 out of 10 people who shoot someone would also be released back onto the streets. And the third factor has its roots far from New York. It goes south of the border, to be exact.
We need to fix our border crisis. Because of what's going on at the border, a lot of unaccompanied minors coming in, gang assaults are up out in Suffolk and Nassau County. Gang crime, gang shootings.
But the situation might change. Officials say a poll shows New York's Democrats and Republicans both want to see more police on the streets again. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
Some young homeless people in New York City will soon get paid $1,250 per month. It's part of a larger experiment to see if direct cash payments to homeless youth will help them to get jobs and housing. NTD's Jason Perry tells us more.
In a study called the Trust Youth Initiative, some of New York City's homeless youth between the ages of 18 and 24 will be paid $1,250 per month for up to 2 years. The study will take place in phases, and the first phase will include 30 to 40 young homeless adults. Along with the financial assistance, other optional services will be available, such as coaching, peer support, financial coaching, and help with housing. The project is part of a joint effort from a research team at Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago and Point Source Youth. Dr. Matthew Morton, the study's principal investigator at Chapin Hall, says the program will support young people who, through no fault of their own, don't have the same access to resources for meeting their basic needs that many of their peers have during transitions to adulthood. Their research included input from youth who have experienced homelessness, and they determined that having complete freedom on how to spend the money with no strings attached was key for helping the homeless young adults get back on their feet. This project is partially funded by the New York City Mayor's Office for Economic Opportunity, along with several other non-government organizations. After the study is completed in approximately 2 years, researchers hope to gain evidence that can be used to push large-scale direct cash payment programs to help end youth homelessness. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
Another parent has gone viral over a powerful speech rebuking critical race theory. This time, a father in Illinois. He shares his experiences and says his race never stopped him from achieving success. Here are the details.
Martin Luther King said he wanted his kids to grow up in a world where they are judged by the contents of their what? Their character, not their skin.
Ty Smith, a father of 2 teenagers, says he worked his way through college without a mother or a father in his home. He attributes his success to his hard work and a conscious change in attitude towards his life. Speaking at a local school board meeting in Illinois earlier this month, he slammed critical race theory, calling it harmful. He says the teachings don't align with his own life experience. Here's the video that's gone viral.
So when you talk about critical race theory, which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to hate each other, how to dislike each other, that's pretty much what it's going to, I don't care what you say, it's pretty much what it's going to all come down to. You're going to deliberately teach kids, this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You're going to purposely tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed. How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How did I get, first of all, time up, because I only got 5 minutes now, 5 minutes. 2 medical degrees. Well, how did I get where I am right now if some white man kept me down? How am I now directing over folks that look just like you guys in this room right now? How? What kept me down? What oppressed me? I worked for myself from off the streets to where I am right now. You gonna sit here and tell me this lie of critical race theory?
Critical race theory, or CRT, is an offshoot of critical theory, which is rooted in Marxism. It critiques history through a racial lens, classifying people as oppressed or oppressor based on the color of their skin. CRT curriculum is making its way into many schools, and it's sparking discussions about race and racism in school districts across the country. Proponents say systematic racism is to blame for inequalities, and talking about this will help bring positive change. Critics, like Smith, say many things come down to one's attitude towards life and the effort one puts in. Smith is a minister, and on his ministry YouTube channel, he's made many videos about having a positive mindset and overcoming hardship. He draws upon Bible teachings and his own life experiences.
In May, a 75-year-old man summited Mount Everest. As of today, he's the oldest American ever to reach the peak of the highest mountain in the world. And he tells NTD how he came from a long journey to this height.
Arthur Muir is a retired lawyer from Chicago, but 7 years into his retirement, Muir did something extraordinary.
Who wouldn't be skeptical? Grandfather says he wants to climb Mount Everest. I mean, you know, I'd be skeptical too. I was skeptical. I still am skeptical.
On May 23, 2021, Muir summited Mount Everest. He became the oldest American to set foot on the peak of the world.
It was much more of a feeling of, I've been grinding away to do this climb, grind.
Muir's first encounter with Mount Everest was 30 years ago, but family life and his 35-year-long career as a corporate finance lawyer took over.
And it's really important that you articulate correctly what the party's intentions are, but it required hours and hours and hours of really tedious, continued focus. And that was really helpful to me, because I could focus for a really long time on the task at hand. It happened to be climbing up and down this mountain.
It wasn't until 2014, when a friend invited Muir to scale a volcano, that his interest was rekindled.
I ended up feeling pretty confident about this. I signed up to go to Mount Everest. But as my skill set kind of improved, and I was kind of fighting the age thing.
Despite having shoulder surgery, Muir began an intense training routine.
I mean, I would exercise every single day. I have they give you a very demanding exercise schedule. It would take between 2 to sometimes 5 hours of exercise, basically every day for 2 years.
With 40 pounds of gear, Muir and his team spent a grueling 63 days on Mount Everest. He tells NTD that the final nighttime ascent to the summit was like being in an elevator shaft.
And then the most wonderful thing happened. Over on my right, I see this light line, this very indistinct line of light, which is the very beginning of the dawn light coming up on in the east. But the emotion for me at that point was much more so than on the summit. I thought, I'm actually going to get to the top of Mount Everest, because you can see the summit ridge, and then you can see.
After a brief stay on the summit, Muir had the tens of thousands of treacherous steps to take back down to safety.
And for me, it was like, okay, job done, mission accomplished, time to go home. I wasn't trying to you go there to see what the mountain will give you, what your body will give you, because it's not about the summit, it's about the effort.
Muir has many more adventures in mind.
Coming up, heat waves in the western U.S. have smashed record temperatures in multiple states. The National Weather Service announced that California's Death Valley reached a scorching 129 degrees Fahrenheit on Thursday. A popular lavender farm in California is back open. Visitors can enjoy the Lavender Festival once again after it was closed for a year. Stay tuned for more here on NTD News.
Every once in a while, something comes along, so masterful, it leaves you in awe. So inspiring, it changes your life. So beautiful, you wish it would never end. When that happens, it's something not to be missed. Shen Yun, coming to the Palace Theater, June 26th and 27th. Tickets at shenyun.com/Stamford.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Never gonna let you go. Never gonna let you
Friday, police recruits showed their support for the Special Olympics in California. Let's hear more from NTD's David Lamb.
Fun, exercise, teamwork, everyone can benefit from sports and athletics, but it can be difficult for those with disabilities to participate. Enter Special Olympics Northern California. They host activities to help the disabled get out and play. On Friday, they held a fundraising run.
So as you can see, law enforcement in San Mateo is participating in a Special Olympics fundraising to fundraise money for athletes with mental disabilities.
Instructors and academy members prepared today for their 4-mile journey. One police recruit said he's participated before.
Well, we're students at the South Bay Regional Training Academy, class SB 163, and we were given an opportunity to run in the city of San Mateo for the Northern California Special Olympics Law Enforcement Torch Relay.
Payne enjoys connecting with the community.
Knowing that it was hot this week with the heat advisories, we all hydrated and got proper rest and nutrition ahead of time, wore sunscreen, and then we made sure we took care of each other and everyone in the group moving together.
He said they brought the torch to another law enforcement group for them to carry on the flame to the next city. Special Olympics Northern California's goal is to provide year-round activities for children and adults through sports, education, and athlete health. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
As more schools in the U.S. are resuming in-person classes in the fall, many people are keeping an eye on each institution's vaccination policies. University of California campuses have stated that they're planning a vaccine mandate for their staff and students. NTD's Cynthia Kai has the story.
The University of California is planning to implement a vaccine mandate for all students, faculty, and staff before returning to campuses for the fall 2021 semester. Eloy Ortiz-Oakley of the UC Board of Regents told the San Francisco Chronicle on Monday that UC school officials plan to move forward with the new system-wide mandate ahead of schedule. He says this will give people more time to comply. The decision is a reversal from the policy announced back in April. Originally, the mandate would not be enforced until after one of the vaccines receives full FDA approval. But attorneys are saying this is problematic.
I should say nobody can be forced to take the vaccine as long as it's under emergency use authorization. That will shift. Pfizer has already applied for regular use, non-emergency use only, but for now, you can't be required to take it.
Legally, public entities, which include public universities and the 10 UC schools, cannot mandate vaccines until full FDA approval.
So, yeah, you're talking about the EUA 21 USC 360 triple B3. So if you look at that, you'll see that you cannot be required to take it. But again, as I said earlier, that doesn't mean there won't be consequences. And that's where you really want to look at the difference between the public and the private sector.
The vaccines remain a controversial issue, and some people are legitimately concerned.
This is what the government's doing. It's very controversial. There are already 4,000 deaths because of the COVID vaccines. So more than 10 times the last 10 years combined as far as vaccine deaths.
UC schools will provide limited medical or religious exemptions to the vaccine mandate. Schools plan to update their vaccination policies with more details on July 15th. The state of California also unveiled a new digital vaccine verification system on June 18th. Whether or not this will impact schools' vaccination policies is currently unknown. Cynthia Kai, NTD News, California.
A heat wave is hitting California. The high temperature at Death Valley National Park on Thursday hit 129 Fahrenheit, just 5 degrees below its all-time record of 134 degrees in 1913.
The first heat wave of the summer grilled America's Southwest this week, but temperatures at its most infamous stretch of desert hit even more suffocating highs. California's Death Valley National Park recorded 129 degrees on Thursday, nearly 54 degrees Celsius. That's the hottest it's been this year, and according to the park's spokesperson Abby Wines, this is just a start.
This is early to have this much of a heat wave. It's happened before, but it's not that common. I would expect in a normal summer for this to just be the beginning, because we usually have temperatures in July that hit 125 or higher. That happens every single summer.
Death Valley Village resident Willow Alford has lived here most of her life and runs a general store in town. She says it's hard to live in an extreme climate and that she'll never get used to it.
I think every year it's hard. Up to a certain temperature, it's okay, like maybe 120, but once it gets above that is when it really gets hard.
This week isn't the hottest it's ever been in the area. That would be back in 1913 when the mercury hit a scorching 134 degrees.
California's second largest water reservoir is near 35% capacity, and drought conditions are now threatening crops in the U.S. Farm Belt.
This drone footage from Wednesday shows houseboats anchored in extremely low water levels at California's Lake Oroville. That's the state's second largest reservoir, where the water level is near 35% capacity, according to the state's Department of Water Resources. The drought has already scorched much of the western U.S. Farmers in California are leaving fields fallow, and several states are rationing water and energy. Now, the drought is spreading to parts of the central U.S. Dry conditions grew more severe across the U.S. Farm Belt this week, threatening recently planted corn, soybean, and wheat crops in Iowa, Minnesota, and the Dakotas. Grain and vegetable oil prices are hovering around the highest in nearly a decade. Many eyes are watching crop growth in the central U.S. as global supplies tighten. Rain is forecast for the northern Midwest and Great Plains this weekend and next week. It will bring relief to some areas, but crop yields in key U.S. population areas remain at risk.
California's extreme drought forced one farmer to fallow 2,000 of his 6,000 acres and dig deep for water to save the crops already planted. Gloria Tso reports.
Paddocks once packed with tomatoes to cotton in Salvador Parra's farm now look like a barren wasteland. As California suffers its worst drought since 1977, everyone, from farmers like Parra down to the average consumer, will soon be feeling the heat. A third of Parra's 6,000-acre Burford Ranch now lies fallow, and he's had to dig deep for water for the remaining crops.
Because of this drought, we're having to pipe water from another well into 4 miles, taking us 4 miles worth of pipeline to get this water here. In addition, we have this well that we're also depending on, and water is coming from 800 feet deep, and we're having to pump it all the way up to the surface so that we can irrigate our crops.
The pipe system is costing the ranch thousands of dollars, but other options are even further out of reach. And water that is available costs up to $2,000 an acre foot, 10 times the regular cost. Parra fears that consumers will soon pay the price.
So consumers should be worried about garlic and onions and other crops because come this time next year, they're going to be very scarce and the cost is going to be higher. Most of the garlic in the United States is grown here in California, and so not having the water, growers will not be able to grow it.
California is one of the country's top producers of vegetables, berries, and all sorts of crops. But this year's scarce produce has left farm workers like Alejandro Pena worried for their livelihoods. Burford Ranch has been forced to cut its workforce from 140 down to 110 employees.
If there's no water, there is no work, no money. People are getting unemployment assistance, those who can, and for those who cannot, the situation is sad.
California's last major drought from 2012 to 2017 forced strict water conservation measures and stoked deadly wildfires.
Southern California's largest lavender farm is welcoming the public to enjoy the Lavender Festival again after being closed last year due to the pandemic.
Rows of blooming purple and white lavender, as far as the eye can see. Every summer, Highland Springs Ranch and Inn hosts a lavender festival at its 123 farm in Beaumont, California. The 20-acre farm is the largest organic lavender farm in Southern California. The farm asks people not to pick the lavender themselves, but welcomes visitors to take pictures, buy lavender-flavored food, and other products.
And we also make a syrup, a lavender syrup, or we make a lavender balsamic vinaigrette. We add lavender to our ice cream to make a lavender ice cream. We make all kinds of things with lavender, and it's also soothing from the inside. So when you drink a lavender tea on a hot day, it cools you from the inside. So it's a really, really useful plant.
Cummerly says they usually see about 40,000 people throughout the lavender season. California's reopening following the pandemic lockdown has brought people outdoors and tourism back to the farm. Visitors are happy to walk through the fields this year since it was closed last year.
I love lavender. Lavender is my favorite color. My bridal party was in lavender. When I heard that these fields were open to lavender fields, I thought, oh, what better day to spend than in a lavender field. So it's just been a dream of mine.
I love the aromatic properties. It's just such a clean, beautiful scent. And it's aesthetically pleasing to look at as well. I love this ranch because it reminds me of a lavender field in France. And since I can't go to France, well, I'm here.
The Lavender Festival has been open since May and will continue until August 1st.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg says virtual reality and augmented reality are the future and will replace TV and even art. Even virtual clothing could be sold on social media in the future. NTD's Patrick Hayden explains.
Mark Zuckerberg says digital holograms will someday be able to replace TVs, books, paintings and sculptures.
You really need a technology that helps you feel like you're right there with another person in order to deliver those. So what virtual and augmented reality are all about is delivering this sense of presence, right? The feeling like you're really there in another place and with another person.
Zuckerberg spoke at a French tech conference, Viva Tech, on Thursday. Facebook's virtual reality headset is all part of its plan. The headset saw sales rise during the pandemic. This week, the company said it will start testing advertising within its virtual headsets. And there's more. Just imagine you need to prepare for an online interview, but you've outgrown your suit. Well, Facebook could save the day with digital clothes for the virtual you. Zuckerberg says digital goods like clothes are set to change the way we live our lives in our new reality. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
Coming up, an American entrepreneur shares his story after he was detained and tortured by the Chinese Communist Party on false accusations. As a survivor, he's trying to raise awareness about human rights abuses under the CCP. More in just a moment here on NTD News. An American entrepreneur went to China to start a business, but was falsely accused of illegal employment and was detained and tortured. NTD's Eileen Ang hears how he survived.
Steven Scherer is from the San Francisco Bay Area. After he graduated from college, he worked in Beijing for 5 years and founded an educational consulting firm in his 20s. In October 2016, while working in China, he was wrongly accused of illegal employment and was arrested and thrown in prison, even though he and his employees were all legally employed with visas. He said the Chinese regime often views foreigners as a threat, especially if they are doing well.
Most of Chinese kind of security laws, they're incredibly vague. It doesn't really mean much. You don't know what it is. And so when I was in interrogations for hours with Chinese police officers, one of the questions they routinely asked me was, do you know how much money we make? And they were looking at my tax documents and they said, do you know how much money you make? You make more than we make. Kind of implying that that was in and of itself illegal. I should not, as a foreigner, be making more money domestically in China than the police officer.
Scherer was imprisoned in what he describes to be a full military-style detention center, with 30-foot-high metal walls and armed guards around the perimeter. Prisoners had their blood drawn, were stripped naked, marched through metal detectors, and had all belongings taken away. The cell conditions were something people living overseas cannot fathom.
You're sharing one single moldy, disgusting squatter toilet among 17 inmates, again, locked in this 24/7. You are eating out of a communal trough. They pour some kind of yellow sludge into a bucket through a funnel into the door. Then 17 inmates just rush and try and eat this, out of a bucket. The conditions are horrific. They're designed to kill you. There's suicide warning signs plastered on the walls.
He was imprisoned for a little under a month. They slept with blood-stained blankets on frozen wooden planks with bright fluorescent lights beaming down the whole time. They stayed up taking turns to keep watch, making sure the inmates didn't kill each other. They were also constantly told they cannot contact anyone in the outside world. When Scherer was finally deported and landed back in San Francisco, he was malnourished, sleep-deprived, and sick. He had to go through therapy to readjust to living normally again. Scherer wrote a book detailing his entire experience titled Surviving Chinese Communist Detention. It was released in May this year. In it, he shares stories about other groups of people who were detained, tortured, and executed for their beliefs: Falun Gong practitioners, Muslims, Uyghurs, Chinese Christians, Tibetan Buddhists, human rights lawyers, and political dissidents. His experience provided him with a newfound appreciation for the Constitution and the rights that protect people in the United States.
That is kind of one of the things that keeps you motivated every single day to share my story, to share this story with the rest of the world, and to kind of warn people and say, hey, look, we don't want encroaching CCP influence here in the West. I go through great lengths to describe the difference between the Chinese people and the Chinese party in my book, and to say, hey, this is not a slight of the Chinese people. This is not a slight against Chinese Americans, and arguably my strongest supporters in most instances were like, please keep speaking, please keep talking, please keep sharing your story.
Scherer now works in tech and is sharing his story on multiple platforms. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
A group of Republican senators on Thursday introduced a new bill. It would require U.S. colleges to disclose their financial ties with the Chinese regime. The Foreign Funding Accountability Act was introduced by a group of Republican senators, including Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Cotton said in a statement, the Chinese Communist Party has made consistent attempts to infiltrate American colleges and universities. The bill states a first violation could see the institution pay up to $250,000 and $750,000 penalty for the second violation. For 3 or more violations, the penalty could be up to $1 million. Cotton said this bill would close donation loopholes and stop the CCP and other foreign agents from donating millions or even billions to steal American intellectual property. And Iranians are voting for their next president, but the winner is guaranteed to be regime approved, and it's likely to be a former prosecutor who helped organize a massacre in Iran more than 30 years ago. NTD's David Vives has more.
The Iranian people are voting for the next president today, but it is a sham election. All of the candidates were chosen by the Council of Guardians and the Supreme Leader, not elected. Of the 7 candidates, Ebrahim Raisi is favored to win. It's a name that invokes difficult memories for some Iranians. Shahin Gobadi is part of a resistance movement that advocates for democracy in Iran. He says the current supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, faces a growing opposition, but Raisi would allow the regime to consolidate the power at the head of state.
The supreme leader of the regime, Ali Khamenei, in a matter of desperation, wants to impose his handpicked individual, Ebrahim Raisi, who is known in Iran as the butcher of 1988 massacre, as the president, to consolidate the power and to prevent another mass uprising.
Ebrahim Raisi used to be a prosecutor in Tehran. Amnesty International reports that he condemned several thousands of Iranians to death by execution or torture in 1988, though the number could be over 30,000. Saeed Sahidi was one of them before he escaped from Iran.
They do torture on me. One of the torture was this. And they do this for a week, every day, 5 hours.
These reenactments are based on the refugees' testimonies and show the brutality of the regime against their opponents. Raisi was one of the brains behind this persecution. More than 30 years later, he may become president. The Iranian regime has faced several major uprisings over the past years.
It has become evident that this game of reformers versus hardliners is simply a fantasy, and the regime is basically showing its real face and real nature to the international community and to the Iranian people.
Some citizens are calling for a boycott of the election, but it's unlikely to change the final outcome. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Palestinian authorities are rejecting a shipment of CCP virus vaccines from Israel. The two sides had a vaccine sharing deal earlier today, but the Palestinian side is now canceling it less than a day later. Israel was going to send 1 million Pfizer-BioNTech doses to Palestinians under the deal. And an initial shipment of around 90,000 doses already reached the West Bank and Gaza today. But Palestinian authorities said the expiration dates turned out to be in June. And that's earlier than what they had initially agreed on, which is either July or August. So they said they won't have enough time to use those doses and sent the shipment back to Israel. Under the vaccine sharing deal, the Palestinians were going to send reciprocal doses to Israel later this year. But that seems to be gone now. The deal was one of Israel's new Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett's policy moves towards Palestinians. And coming up, a rare species of orchid is found in London in a most unexpected place. Find out more in just a moment here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm gonna pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
A rare species of orchid is found in London in a most unexpected place. No wonder botanists are excited. NTD's David English has this story.
11 floors up on a central London rooftop, the Namura Bank is a haven for city wildlife. Ecologist Mark Patterson found some lesser tongue orchids when he was doing a plant survey.
At the corner of my eye, I noticed the flower spike, so I went down to have a closer look at what previously had been just a small bunch of leaves and realised it was an orchid plant.
He wasn't sure if they are lesser tongue orchids or not. 2 orchid experts confirmed they are. Patterson initially found 9 plants, now there are 16.
This is a small plant. It's only got 3 or 4 flowers on it. It's probably a seedling from one of the larger parent plants just behind us here.
While common in the Mediterranean and North Africa, this is believed to be the only colony of lesser tongue orchids in the UK at the moment, and only the second time they have been found here. An expert from Kew Gardens says it makes sense that they made their home on a green roof.
If it were going to end up landing, a seed was going to land anywhere in Britain, then a green roof seems like quite a good place for it to be, particularly somewhere warm and dry, relatively dry like London.
Patterson says the roof of a bank provides a safe and secure place for the orchids. If they were in the wild, they may have been poached already. David English, NTD News.
A Spanish inventor found an innovative way to help people with missing limbs. He uses 3D printers to create tailor-made prosthetic arms and gives them away for free. NTD's Eddie Aitken brings us this report.
8-year-old Juan was born without the lower part of his left arm. Recently, he received his first prosthesis. Juan was thrilled.
It's going to help me pick up things like toys, like pillows, and things like that.
The arm comes from a Madrid-based organization that uses 3D printers to create tailor-made prostheses. It then donates them to people around the world. The founder is a former toy designer with a passion for 3D printing. He started tinkering with prostheses as a hobby. In 2017, he then delivered some arms to Kenya. That was a spark to start Ayúdame 3D, which means Help Me 3D in Spanish. The 5 arms that I took for the people worked so well and so perfectly that I said to myself, how can I just stop here? 4 years later, it has grown into an international entity that delivers 200 to 250 arms a year all over the world, always free of charge and to anybody who requests one. When we send the package, it's very impersonal, but when we hand it over personally, it impacts us a lot. We have cases here in Spain, for example, 2 women that lost both legs and both arms, and thanks to our very light and very easy to use devices, they have had a second chance in life. Martinez says each arm costs a tiny fraction of conventionally made prostheses, which can cost up to £30,000. He says his goal is to deliver to twice as many countries next year. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
A scary sight for residents of a major Japanese city today, a huge brown bear wandering around on a school playground. Residents nearby also spotted the big animal running down the streets. A woman captured a video of the bear on the playground of a middle school. The bear then entered a Japanese self-defense force base and injured 4 people, including a soldier. Local officials later shot and killed the bear. And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox. We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.